Jump in and get going. You might notice that things are a little bit different, the way that I've set things up. Move my office around, which is totally fun. Anyway, I'm just going to jump in and talk about a couple of things that I have been looking at and working on with. I also noticed that I have some books behind me somewhere that you can see. Anyway, I'm going to just get in and we're going to talk a little bit about having my sponsors come back. I've had a few sponsors come back over the last couple of weeks, and it's been really terrific, actually. One thing that's really funny about it is that I had a couple of them basically tell me that they had gotten my emails over the last... Oh, my light just died. They had some emails. All right, folks, welcome back to the Podcast Playbook. I'm your host, Charles Max Wood, and we're going to be talking about having sponsors come back and the power of follow-up. One thing that's kind of interesting in that discussion is that, and I'm just going to kind of walk through what I've been through over the last week. I had a handful of sponsors get back to me and say that they were interested in coming back and sponsoring. Now, I think a few weeks ago when I recorded, I talked a little bit about just some of the issues that I'd been having with monetizing the podcasts. I'd been living on what I was monetizing on the podcast over the last couple of weeks, or the last couple of years, and just over the last 6 months or so, things just really, really slowed down. A lot of it due to COVID-19. And so, anyway, I got back in and started reaching out to and following up with sponsors just to see if I could make things work. And I've also accepted a full-time job at a relatively large company. I'm not going to give out that information just because it's not really relevant to the show, and I've actually had some social media people try and cancel me, and I don't really want them to screw with my new employer. So, anyway, yeah, my plan basically at this point is to get the podcast network back on its feet, and then once I have 6 months or so worth of money in the bank, then I'll probably quit my job. But in the meantime, I'm trying to grow it, and I'm trying to grow it kind of like what somebody would do if they had just built up a new show and kind of got to this place, right? So I started reaching out to some of my past sponsors because essentially, yeah, they seem like the most likely parties to come and drop money on my audience and want to monetize my audience. And so I had a couple of people actually reach out. I also had some of my hosts put me in touch with some companies that they had contacts at, and that also worked out, to bring in a few $1,000, which I can then use to pay some of the bills for the podcasts. But yeah, one of them I sent probably 3, 4, 5 emails to, never heard anything back. I mean, just crickets, complete silence, right? And I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe they're not happy with me, or maybe, something went wrong at one point. And then they get back to me out of the blue and they're like, hey, we've got some stuff going on and we want to advertise. And that was super cool, right? I was super excited about that. Thought that was really pretty great. And so when they got a hold of me, one of them basically said, like I said, I've been reading your emails, good stuff, right? Because I was emailing them and saying, hey, you ought to do this with sponsorships. Hey, we're trying these new things with sponsorships. And and so we had a great conversation with them. Things went really, really well. And yeah, it turned out that some of these companies had just kind of been sitting on some of the money monetization with regards to advertising, which is kind of what I figured. Some of the other companies that I actually had get back to me, that's what they were telling me. And so when I talked to them, we started setting things up, and it looks like they're probably going to sponsor a number of the shows. So that's just to say, and this is something that I found is really, really true for a lot of other companies, is that a lot of them, they'll either get back to you on the first or second email, and that's typically because they have discussed doing podcast sponsorships in the past. And so because of that, they tend to want to have the conversation about sponsoring now, right? And so you have that going on and working for you. And then the other end of things is that then what I find is that you have to follow up 6, 7, 8 times before they really get back to you. And when that goes down, you end up having a slightly different conversation with them, because then it's, oh, well, I've been getting your emails for a while and I finally got back to you. And so I just want to really push that along, that, if they get back to you right away, great. But if it's not within the first email or two, it's probably going to be at like the 8th or 9th email. So if you're looking for sponsors, I guess the real message here is just to keep following up. Keep sending them emails. Some people will get back to you and they will say, don't bug me anymore, right? But for the rest of them, keep emailing, keep following up, keep sending them something, keep giving them opportunities to connect with you. One thing that I'm going to be doing here in the future is actually putting together webinars so that I can talk to the sponsors directly and do a sales pitch there, but also give them the information they need so that they know how to make it work. Because even if they take what I give them, it's like, hey, make sure you have a place for people to go, make sure they have a reason to come check you out, blah, 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 right? All the things that I'm going to put in the webinar. If they go use that on a different podcast, they're going to come back to me because I know what I'm talking about, right? And so at the end of the day, that's what I'm looking at doing. But in the meantime, the people that I already had relationships with, I was able to actually just sit down, send out some more emails, and get in touch with them. And that really worked out. One other angle on this that I'm also going to put in. So the one company that I talked to this last week that I already had a relationship with, the person I was talking to, I talked to her, over the last 10 years that I've been podcasting about sponsorships. And so she kind of spearheaded it for the company. Then now they have a marketing guy that I'm going to be talking to, but she got on the call because we had a relationship. One other company that I was put in touch with, we'd had their CEO on our shows a couple of times, but the person that I was put in touch with, she didn't have any kind of prior relationship with me, and it had been several years since I'd had their CEO on the show, and so there really wasn't a strong connection there. But because I had a prior relationship with the company, that helped to break some of the ice. And then one other sponsor, and I'm going to be talking to them next week, we're going to be having a very similar conversation, and they sponsored last year. I think it was last year they sponsored to the tune of like $100,000 over the course of the year, right? And then they hired a new marketing person, and the marketing person wanted to try some other stuff, and so they kind of went and did whatever they were going to do, right? But I emailed their CEO again. He's also been on our show twice. And so I emailed him and I said, hey, what's the story? What's going on? What can we do? And funny enough, he put me in touch with their marketing person, and I don't remember if she's the same marketing person as before or not. But she got back to me and was like, yeah, let's talk. And so what's also interesting is that sometimes, depending on the situation and the relationship, what you may find, and this is something that I found, and I don't know if it's just tech companies or if it's everywhere. I think it's a little bit of everywhere, and the tech companies might be slightly more prone to it, is that if I reach out to somebody and I work with them for a year or so and they disappear, if I wait another 6 months and reach back out, I wind up talking to somebody different. And, so in some ways I get to start over with them. And, depending on how well the sponsorship went or what the relationship was, they usually don't have any context, right? So if it worked out well, I can tell them how well it worked out. And if there's something new I want to try with them, they don't have any of the biases from the previous person, and so I can just make that work. And so it's been really, really interesting just to be in that position where I can sit down and I can have a conversation with them, and we can get the ball rolling again, and I can make it work. One other thing that's also interesting with that is that I did have people actually out there actively working against me last year, and a lot of the marketing folks that were there then are not there now. And then one thing that's starting to happen with some of the other people that I have worked with over the years with sponsorships is one marketing guy in particular. I reached out to him based on the company that he used to work at, and he got back to me and he was like, yeah, it'd be really cool, and actually set me up with a sponsorship at the company he was at the time. And this was back in January, and he's since moved on to another company, and we're having another conversation. And so all of this just to say that maintaining the relationship, continuing to follow up, making sure that you maintain those relationships, make sure you're reaching out, even when you don't, quote unquote, need them, it all pays off. And so if you're going to be in the space and you're going to be working the sponsorship end of things, then you need to be working on building a relationship with the people you're working with in order to make that happen. Now, I know that there are some other places where you can find sponsors, and I've seen some of those. The only issue that I've really run into with those is that, for example, in the programming niche, they don't really have any sponsors that are great fits, right? I can get in and I can sell like productivity tools or productivity training or things like that to programmers, but they don't have the things that are specific to my audience. And so I tend not to get the ad rate I want, and they don't tend to get the kind of ROI they necessarily want. And so at the end of the day, it's kind of a mixed bag as to whether they're going to be happy, I'm going to be happy, or both. And so what I found is that I actually have to go and reach out to people on my own and do that work. So if you want to have that work out for you and you want the sponsorships to go the way that you need them to, then what you have to do is you actually have to follow up and maintain that relationship and make sure that they know that you're still there, that you care, that you're around, that you want to see them be successful, and then make it work from there. So that's what I've got. If you want to learn more about monetization, I'm actually working on getting my podcast starter playbook together, and that course is going to be coming out here within the next couple of weeks. And you can get the beta pricing on it. The full price is going to be somewhere in the range of $1,000 to $1,500. The beta price is going to be somewhere in the range of about $250 to $300. So if you're looking for a deal on how to get your podcast started and running, then go ahead and grab that. And if you're looking for kind of the next level stuff, that's going to come next. But I've had a lot of friends, as I've been talking to people about this, who need the starter edition. So I'm going to be putting that together first. So we'll get the starter edition together, and then we'll turn around and we'll have the growth edition, and then maybe the mastery edition or the network edition come out after that. So hang tight. I'm looking forward to making that work. And if you have any questions, you can shoot me an email, chuck@podcastplaybook.co, and we'll catch you on the next one. Max out. Hey, folks, and welcome back to the Podcast Playbook. Oh, I need to change the title. Hey, buddy, and welcome back to the Podcast Playbook. I'm going to be talking about your audience avatar. And this is something I've been going through the 2 Comma Club X program with Russell Brunson, and we were having a bit of training, and he talked about building your avatar for your product and your audience. And what was interesting was that as I watched the video and kind of worked through it, I went through and I created an avatar for my developer podcast network, even though I'm also creating an avatar, admittedly, for Podcast Playbook. And one thing that was really interesting that came out of that is I realized that the avatar that I kind of had in mind for example, our JavaScript podcast was JavaScript developers. But the problem is that you have JavaScript developers that are brand new. You have JavaScript developers that are kind of mid-level, mid-range. You have JavaScript developers that are sort of masters, or at least have been around long enough to see some of the issues that you run into as a developer. And then you've got people who are actually designing and architecting software to be built in JavaScript, right? And so you have people at all these different levels. And what I realized was that, we talk about all kinds of things related to careers and related to JavaScript and related to front-end development and back-end development. Anyway, there are a lot of different ways that we approach this. And what was interesting was that, it feels like for some of our shows, we're just kind of all over the place, right? So we get something that's interesting in the space, and we have plenty of listeners, right? JavaScript Jabber gets about 15,000 downloads every episode. But the issue is that we're kind of all over the place instead of focusing on just one demographic. And so as I sat down and really thought about it, I was thinking, okay, who do we want to reach, right? Who are we trying to help? And what I realized is that, we do want JavaScript developers, but I'm looking for those people that are kind of the self-starters that are going to go out and do the work. They're actively looking to build their career and, contribute to the community and make a difference in whatever way they have in their mind, right? And typically I'm also looking for people that are kind of stuck right before that mid-level or maybe at that mid-level, right? So people at the beginning, what happens is people come into development, and I'm going to talk about why this is important to you in a minute, but why I came to this was essentially that it gave me a real sense of clarity as far as who I needed to get on the show, right? But what we're looking at and what really matters here is people get stuck, right? And so they have that particular problem where it's, okay, I'm competent at JavaScript, right? Or I'm competent at Ruby or whatever programming language we're covering, right? So I'm competent at that. I can do my job. They're going to keep paying me to do the job because I'm good at it. But the problem is that I get stuck knowing what to do next, what to learn next, how to grow from here, right? I had somebody tweet at me today, or that I saw today, and essentially they said that they were growing by contributing to open source and working on a few other areas, talking to people who were ahead of them, and all of those things are important, right? But they still felt a little bit stuck. And so how do I go and work with these people to help them level up? Now, JavaScript Jabber can focus on the technical skills that they need to level up if they're working in JavaScript, right? And then I can go in and I can work on some of the other, what we call soft skills in the development community, right? So how to work with other people, how to manage projects, how to make sure you're being productive, make sure you know how to do this or that or the other, right? And as we talk about this stuff, I can put that into another show. And so I'm going to start this show. I'm calling it the DevRev. So if you're a developer, go check it out. I've got a bunch of other stuff on that feed. I'm probably just going to ditch it and reboot it. But yeah, when it comes right down to it, that's what we're looking at. And so at the end of the day, what we're playing with now is I've got this avatar, so I can go back and I can tell my hosts and tell my team, look, we want to invite people who are going to be able to help people level up their skills and level up their JavaScript skills so that people who are here can get to here, right? And that's what it really did, right? So now we're not talking about stuff that's out there or stuff that, gee, this is kind of interesting to Chuck, but it's not so interesting to everybody else. No, we're looking at the things that are specifically going to help those people out, and we're putting it all together. So that's what I'm working on now. And it's funny because I'm going through this after having podcasted for 10 years, 11 years, and it's making a massive difference for me. And I can only imagine where we'd be at if we had done this at the beginning. So I'm going to be working on that and pulling that together, but I thought it was an interesting exercise. And what I really want you to do is sit down and figure it out too, and just be like, look, where are they at? Like, what level are they at? What are they good at? What are they bad at? How did they come in, right? So one thing that's in the avatar, I have a male avatar and a female avatar, right? And so the female avatar is somebody who's in their late 30s, early 40s. She actually went through a coding boot camp, right? And made the career change from another career where she was doing accounting or something like that. And now that she's in JavaScript, she's been doing it for a couple of years. She feels like she ought to be further along than she is, but she doesn't know what to learn next. And so at the end of the day, she's looking for content that can help her move ahead, because at the end of her career, she doesn't want to be a junior developer. She wants to be in a leadership role, right? And then the male avatar is younger, and he's self-taught, right? But a lot of the other things apply, right? And he's willing to invest now in his skills so that he can get ahead early and become a thought leader in the space. But in order to do that, he's got to be able to keep current and make the kind of difference that he wants to make. And you kind of get the idea, right? And so now I can tailor the content specifically to these people, because I know they're trying to make this kind of a movement in their career. They're trying to make this kind of a difference in their career. They're trying to go in and own the space in these ways. And so I can teach them how to do that, because I've done a lot of that same stuff. And I was that hungry young developer, 15 years ago. And so I know what to tell them in order to get them to level up. And so that's the kind of thing that I'm working on. And that's the kind of thing that I'm going to be encouraging them to work on as they move through. And then I'm going to be giving them the framework in order to continue to do what they want to do, right? So I'm actually working on a course for them. I'm working on Podcast Playbook for You, Podcast Starter Playbook in particular right now. And then for them, it's the MVP, Most Valuable Programmer. And it's, we're talking about, designing your lifestyle and your career. What do you want, right? And then knowing what you have to know in order to be able to deliver that, right? And then how to keep current, how to stay abreast of what's going on in the space that you're in. And then, evaluating your own growth, right? How do I grow and how do I know if I'm growing, right? How to learn, what to do if your job isn't providing you what you need, right? How do you upgrade your job or find another one, right? And I've got it up on my whiteboard right in front of me, actually, but I can't see the last one. So another one's generating content. The next one is outreach and networking. And then the final one is just ongoing learning, right? So it's just, how do I level up on this? How do I level up on that, right? Podcast Playbook's the same deal, right? So my avatar looks a whole lot like my friend Jeff. He's looking to start a group where he helps real estate folks level up their stuff so that, they're making more sales and selling more real estate and things like that. And so, I'm starting at the beginning with, what audience do you want to serve? What avatar do you want to serve? Doing research to know where they're paying attention to and what they're talking about, right? And so that's kind of the keeping current end of things, right? Then we'll talk about setup and equipment, and then we'll talk about how to start recording your podcast, and then how to edit them and release them. And so you get the idea, right? So we're building these building blocks along the way, and that's what I'm working on, right? And that's why I decided to start with the Podcast Starter Playbook, is because I can get immediate feedback from people I know who need this, and then I can deliver what they need, and I can make sure that they're getting what they need in order to succeed, right? But he's looking to build out his coaching and mastermind stuff like in November, right? When the real estate market starts to slow down. But in order for him to do that, the best thing that he can do right now is actually commit to putting content out there on a regular basis so that he can grow, so that, in 3 months, he's got this backlog of content and an audience to pitch it to so that he can bring a bunch of people in, right? Same thing with a couple of other people. I've got another friend who wants to get out of his job and go freelance, and he's worried about how do I find clients. And I'm like, well, what worked for me when I was freelance was having a podcast. And so, again, it's the same kind of avatar. It's the same kind of people. I'm talking to another person that's in Two Comma Club X. She's in my group, right? And so she's trying to reach veterans and, what happens after they're discharged from the military. And again, right, it's, okay, well, here's how you start your business. That's what she's doing. And my point is here's how you start your podcast, right? Here's how you build a podcast that's going to feed into your business. And of course, here we're going to be talking about me actually building the courses and selling them through the podcasts, which is something that I haven't done yet, right? I haven't ever built a course and sold it. Well, technically I have, because I did a 30-day challenge this month. But you get the idea, right? That's what we're putting together, and that's what we're going to grow into. But in the meantime, how do you get sponsors? How do you find affiliate deals? How do you make more sales? All that stuff, right? How do you get this at least to the point where it'll sustain itself, right? So that you don't have to put a ton of time in editing it and massaging it and all that stuff. But you don't have to pour a bunch of money into it either, right? So it's at least bringing in enough to pay for an editor or pay for the effort that you shouldn't be putting in on your own, right? And so at the end of the day, that's why you need that avatar, is because then I know, okay, this is where you're at, and so this is how I can build things out so you can get to that level that you want to be at. So anyway, that's pretty much where things come in with the avatar. This is kind of an experience report show and kind of an advice show. If you have any questions, email me, chuck@podcastplaybook.co. And if there's anything I can do for you, let me know. Go ahead and comment and subscribe. And we'll throw another one at you here soon. Max out, everybody.